She should not have asked me that while I was still wearing my company badge. Chloe stood across from me in the empty hallway outside a private event room, her jaw tight, her eyes brighter than I had ever seen them. Not soft, not warm, hurt. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Did you ever say yes to me because saying yes to my mother was better for your career?" I felt that question like a blow to the chest. There are some things a man can answer fast. His name, his age, whether he has ever been in love. That was not one of them, because the truth was ugly at the beginning. I had agreed to one dinner because Victoria Langford was my boss, and refusing her had started to feel like a risk I could not keep taking. But the truth after that was different. After that, every step I took toward Chloe had been mine. Careful, wanted, real. And still, Chloe was looking at me like she was standing at the edge of something and deciding whether to jump or run. "If there was ever a part of this that belonged to her," she said, voice low now, "I need to know before I let it belong to me." I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because one wrong sentence could end everything before it had even begun. And the worst part was, I was no longer sure whether I was trying to protect her, protect myself, or protect the job that had first put me in her path. So I asked the only question that mattered. "If I tell you the whole truth," I said, "will you stay long enough to hear how it changed?" The first time Victoria Langford tried to set me up, I thought she was joking. It happened during my quarterly review. She sat across from me in her glass office, and one hand on a printed performance report, the other wrapped around a coffee mug that probably cost more than my first car. Behind her, the Chicago skyline looked cold and expensive. "You work too much," she said. I gave her a polite smile. "Occupational hazard." "You're 32, James." "I'm aware. And still single." That made me laugh once, mostly because I thought there was no chance this conversation was real. "Is that a problem on the job description?" Her mouth moved like she was almost smiling. "No, but it does make me wonder." "About?" "How a man who stays calm in client disasters can still look surprised every time someone mentions dinner with a woman." I kept my expression steady. That was one thing working under Victoria had taught me. Never react too fast. Never hand her an advantage. "I manage accounts," I said. "Not blind dates." She looked down at the report for half a second. "My daughter is back in Chicago." There it was, I should have known. Victoria never circled a point unless she wanted the walk around it to feel educational. "She's 29, Victoria continued. "Smart, independent, impossible. You'd like her." "With respect," I said carefully. "That sounds like a terrible idea." Her eyes lifted to mine. Sharp, curious. Dangerous in the way smart people are when they hear a boundary and start testing its strength. "Why?" "Because you're my boss." "And?" "And she's your daughter." One shoulder rose in a slight shrug. "She's also a grown woman." "So am I," I said. Still a bad idea. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. It was not. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria mentioned Chloe 3 different times. Once after a leadership meeting, once during a lunch with senior staff, once while walking with me to the elevator after a client call. Never pushy on the surface, never direct enough to quote later. Just a pattern, a pressure, a hand at the center of my back. By the 4th time, I stopped pretending not to see it. Victoria. We were alone in her office again, late. The kind of hour when the rest of the floor had gone quiet, and every sound seemed more serious than it was. She glanced up from her laptop. "Yes?" "I'm saying no." "To what?" I almost admired that. Almost. "To this." I made a small motion between us. The setup. The hints. The idea that I should meet your daughter because you decided I'd fit. She leaned back slowly. Yeah, you make it sound sinister. I'm making it sound clear. Something changed in her face then, not anger exactly, more like interest. Like she had been waiting to see whether I would finally push back. It's one dinner, she said. It's not one dinner if I already had to say no 4 times. Her gaze held mine. Are you afraid of me, James? No. That part was true. I respected her. I owed a lot of my professional growth to her. I knew what she could do to a room, a deal, a career, but fear was too simple a word. I'm trying to be smart, I said. Smart men know when an opportunity is harmless. I let that sit between us. Then I said the thing I probably should not have said out loud. It stops being harmless when the person offering it signs my checks. Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, just dangerous. Now Victoria folded her hands on the desk. You think I would punish you for refusing dinner with my daughter? I think power changes the meaning of invitations. For the first time in 4 years, I saw something close to surprise in her eyes. Then it was gone. She's already agreed to meet you, she said. That hit me wrong. Not flattering, not exciting. Wrong. Did she want to? Victoria did not answer right away, which told me everything I needed to know. I stood. With respect, that makes it worse. Sit down, James. I stayed standing. No. Something passed over her face. Not rage, not humiliation. Something harder to name. A woman too used to deciding outcomes suddenly reminded other people existed inside them. Then she exhaled and looked away toward the window. You are not being asked to date her, she said. Yeah, you are being asked to have dinner with someone who has spent 3 years away from the city and even longer deciding that every man I mention must be wrong on principle. That sounds like her decision to keep. It is, and she keeps too many of them. I should have left right there. Maybe if I had, none of what came after would have happened. Instead, I said, Did you pressure her too? Victoria said nothing. That was the answer. I looked at the floor once, then back at her. I'm not doing this for you. A faint line appeared between her brows. Then don't. That irritated me more than it should have. You don't get to say that now. Her voice cooled. James, you are very good at your job. Do not confuse that with moral authority. And you should not confuse concern with control. We stared at each other. And then she reached into a drawer, pulled out a cream-colored reservation card, and slid it across the desk toward me. The Sterling. Friday, 7 o'clock. I looked at the card but did not touch it. I said no. Yes, she replied. You did. Then why am I still standing here? Her answer came quiet. Because sometimes people are worth meeting even when the introduction is badly handled. That should not have moved me, but it did. Not because I trusted her. I did not. Not fully. But because beneath all her control, all her polish, I heard something raw in that sentence. Not strategy. Need. A mother who had no idea how to stop interfering without feeling like she was disappearing. I picked up the reservation card. One dinner, I told myself. Be polite. End it cleanly. And make sure Chloe knows none of this was her choice any more than it was mine. That was the plan. It stayed the plan right up until I saw her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Because the first thing Chloe Langford said to me was, Before we sit down, I need one promise. We were standing just inside the restaurant entrance, both of us still holding the awkwardness of being sent there by the same controlling woman. She looked tired, honest. a little angry, more real than anyone I had met in that world in a long time. "What promise?" I asked. "That if either of us feels this turning into one of my mother's little projects," she said, "we leave." I looked at her for 1 second, maybe two, then I said, "I was hoping you'd say that." Her shoulders dropped just a little. The first sign of relief. We sat down, and in somewhere between the breadbasket and the moment she laughed with her whole face instead of just her mouth, my clean exit started slipping out of my hands. By the time she slid the reservation card back across the table and said, "Keep this, proof that neither of us chose the beginning," I had already started fearing something worse than a bad idea. What if I chose the rest of it anyway? I kept the reservation card in my wallet long after that first dinner, not because I was sentimental, because every time I looked at it, I remembered the one fact that made me feel safe. Chloe and I had not chosen the beginning, which meant if anything honest was growing between us, it had to survive on choice alone. 4 days after that dinner, Victoria called me into her office again. She did not ask me to sit. That was never a good sign. "You saw Chloe on Friday," she said. I kept my face neutral. "Yes." And I knew better than to say too much in that office. "We had dinner." Her eyes narrowed a fraction. "That is not what I asked." No, it wasn't. She wanted tone. She wanted possibility. She wanted to hear whether her interference had turned into momentum. "It was fine," I said. Victoria gave a small, almost amused breath. "Fine is a useless word. People use it when they want to hide the part that matters." I said nothing. She leaned back in her chair. "Chloe told me you listened more than you talked." That caught me off guard. Not because Chloe had spoken to her mother. That part was expected. Because Chloe had noticed. "She also said," Victoria continued, "that you didn't try to impress her." I almost smiled despite myself. Should I be defending myself? "That depends." Her gaze sharpened. "Are you seeing her again?" There it was, the pressure, cleaner this time. Less dressed up. I thought about lying. Then I thought about Chloe sitting across from me in that restaurant asking for one simple promise. "If this ever turns into one of my mother's little projects, we leave." "No," I said. "Not because you want us to." Victoria's expression did not change, but the silence after that was heavy. "You think I pushed too hard," she said. "I think you don't hear yourself when you want something." She studied me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, she nodded once. "Maybe." She looked back at the file on her desk. "You can go." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. That same evening, around 7, and my phone buzzed while I was heating leftovers I did not want. Chloe. For 3 full seconds, I just stared at her name. Then I answered. "Hey." Her voice came softer than I expected. Not careful, not formal, just tired. "Hi, am I interrupting anything?" "Only a very disappointing dinner." That got a quiet laugh out of her. "Good. Mine was worse." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Your mother?" "Of course." Another small pause. She asked if I felt sparks. I closed my eyes. "Please tell me you said no." I told her sparks are how house fires start. That made me laugh hard enough to surprise myself. And then she laughed too, really laughed. And for one brief second, it felt like the whole strange situation had cracked open and something human had stepped through. We talked for 19 minutes, and I know that because after we hung up, I looked at the call log like an idiot. 19 minutes about almost nothing. Her coffee order, my hatred of team-building retreats, the fact that she still got lost in neighborhoods she had lived near as a child. The fact that I had once worn 2 different shoes to work during a product launch, and nobody noticed until lunch. Nothing important. Everything important. 2 days later, she texted me a photo of a crooked shelf in her apartment with the message, "Be honest. Is this a cry for help?" I replied, "It's a crime scene." She sent back, "I knew it." After that, it became easy too fast. Not dramatic, not reckless, just easy. A message in the morning, a joke in the afternoon, a complaint at night, then longer conversation, then real ones. And she told me she had come back to Chicago after 3 years in Portland because her mother had framed it as temporary support during a family transition, which turned out to mean weekly dinners, constant opinions, and a quiet expectation that Chloe's life should remain close enough to supervise. I told her that working for Victoria was like standing next to a generator. Useful, impressive, dangerous, if you forgot what it could do. Chloe sent back, "That is the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about her." A week later, we met again. Not at some polished restaurant her mother would approve of. A small cafe in Wicker Park, with uneven tables and music low enough to ignore. When I got there, Chloe was already seated by the window, one hand wrapped around a mug, the other holding a pencil over a folded piece of paper. And no makeup that I could notice. Cream sweater, dark jeans. She looked like herself, or at least more like herself than she had that first night. "What are you drawing?" I asked as I sat down. She folded the paper in half before I could see it. "Nothing I'm prepared to defend." "That bad?" "That honest," I smiled. "Those are usually the same thing." Her eyes lifted to mine, and there was something there now that had not been there at the restaurant. Recognition, not attraction alone, not curiosity. That quiet feeling of already knowing the rhythm of somebody's voice. For a while, we stayed light. Coffee, work. The man at the counter wearing sunglasses indoors for reasons nobody should have to explain. Then the conversation shifted. Chloe ran one finger along the rim of her mug and asked, "Matt, can I ask you something without you managing the answer?" "That depends how dangerous it is." She gave me a look. "Why did you really say yes?" There was no accusation in her voice yet. That almost made it harder. I could have softened it, could have blamed timing, office politics, social pressure, could have made the truth smaller. Instead, I said, "At first, because saying no to your mother kept becoming more complicated than it should have been." Chloe nodded once. No shock, no anger, just confirmation of what she had probably guessed all along. "And after you met me?" I looked at her. The cafe noise faded. The street outside blurred into movement. "After I met you," I said carefully, "I kept showing up because it stopped being about her." She held my gaze for a long second, then looked down at her cup. "And that answer almost makes me feel better." "Almost?" A humorless smile touched her mouth. "Do you know how many men have wanted access to my mother and mistaken that for wanting me?" The question landed harder than I expected. I shook my head. "Enough," she said. "Enough that I can tell in under 10 minutes when someone is talking to my last name instead of my face." I felt something old and protective rise in my chest. Not possessive, not romantic, not yet. Just angry on behalf of a woman who had spent too much of her life being mistaken for a door. "I'm sorry," I said. She gave a small shrug. "I didn't tell you for sympathy." "I know." "Then why are you looking at me like that?" I had no safe answer for that. So I told her the true one. "'Cause I hate that anyone ever made you doubt the difference." Something changed in her expression. Very small. But I saw it. A softening, a shift. Like she had been standing with her weight on one foot for years and had finally moved. We stayed there for almost 2 hours. She told me about sustainable design, about building spaces that made people feel calmer instead of smaller. I told her about my father teaching me that the fastest way to lose respect was to pretend you knew something you didn't. She laughed more that day. So did I. When we stepped back out onto the sidewalk, the late afternoon light was starting to thin. People moved around us in coats and scarves and private lives. Chloe stopped near the curb, hands in her pockets. "This doesn't have to be fake anymore," she said. I looked at her. "No, it doesn't." She let out a breath, then nodded like she had just made a decision she planned to stand by. "Good," she said, "because I don't want to do fake with you." Neither did I. I should have said something braver then, something cleaner, more romantic. Instead, I said, "Your mother is going to make this difficult." Chloe laughed under her breath. "James, my mother makes breathing difficult." That made me smile. Then a gust of wind pushed a strand of hair across her face, and without thinking, I reached up and tucked it back. The second I did it, I knew the line had moved, not crossed, moved. My hand fell away. Chloe didn't step back, didn't lean in either. She just looked at me with that same steady honesty from the first night and said the one thing I was not prepared for. "If this goes wrong, promise me it goes wrong because of us." I frowned slightly. "Not because of her." "Yes," she said. "Not because of her." I took out the reservation card from my wallet, looked at it once, then tore it cleanly in half. Her eyes widened. I tore it again, then handed the pieces to her. "No beginning," I said. No leverage, no proof she gets credit." For a second, she just stared at the torn card in her palm. Then she folded her fingers around it, like it was something far more valuable than paper. And when she looked back up at me, I knew the truth had become dangerous, because this was no longer a blind date. This was the moment I started wanting something I could lose. The first time I knew I was in trouble, Chloe fell asleep on my couch with one hand still wrapped around a mug of tea she had stopped drinking an hour earlier. And it was late. Too late for company. Too quiet for pretending. She had come over after a brutal day with a contractor who kept speaking past her to the junior man on her team, as if her title and her talent became optional the second a man entered the room. She told the story sitting cross-legged on my sofa, shoes kicked off, anger fading into exhaustion, one sentence at a time. By the end, her eyes were half closed. "You should go to bed," I said softly. She mumbled something that sounded like, "I am in bed," then drifted off before I could argue. I sat there for a full minute just watching her breathe. No performance, no sharp comeback, no careful wall between us. Just a woman who trusted me enough to get tired in my presence. That scared me more than anything had in years, because attraction was easy to dismiss. Chemistry could be explained away. Even the quiet ache I felt when her name lit up my phone could be called timing, loneliness, convenience. But trust was different. Trust meant I was already carrying something fragile. I took the mug from her hand, found a blanket in the hall closet, and covered her without waking her. Her sketchbook had slipped from her bag and landed half open on the floor beside the couch. I bent to pick it up and saw a half-finished drawing before I could look away. It was a room. Warm light, large windows, a couch, bookshelves, and on the corner of the page, in small, neat writing, 2 words, "Safe here." I closed the sketchbook and set it gently on the coffee table. I did not sleep much that night, not because anything happened, because nothing did, because I understood, and with a force that made my chest tighten, that if I handled this wrong, I would become one more man who made her regret lowering her guard. From then on, I was careful in a way that felt almost brutal. Not distant, never cold, just deliberate. When she texted, I answered. When she wanted to see me, I made time. When our hands brushed, I let the moment breathe instead of grabbing for more. Whatever this was becoming, I wanted it clean, something that could survive daylight. For a while, it did. We built a rhythm that felt strangely private, even in a city this big. Coffee after work, walks by the river, voice notes about bad meetings and worse takeout. She started sending me photos of her sketches. I started sending her screenshots of ridiculous client emails with no names attached. She teased me for alphabetizing my spice rack. I told her handwriting looked like it belonged to someone smarter than me. "Someone smarter than you does not alphabetize cumin," she texted back. I smiled at my phone more than any grown man should. And then one Thursday night, everything shifted. Her message came in at 6:14. "Can we have dinner tonight? I need to tell you something before you hear it somewhere else." I read that line 3 times. By the time I got to the restaurant, she was already there. Not touching the menu, not touching the water, her hands folded too tightly on the table. The second I sat down, I knew this was not a conversation either of us wanted. "What happened?" I asked. Chloe held my gaze for 1 second, then looked down. "Lucas is back in Chicago." I had heard his name before, but only in fragments. Her ex, 4 years. Architect, New York. And the man who had loved her most when she was easiest to admire, and least when she became impossible to direct. Still, hearing his name from her mouth felt like stepping onto ice and realizing too late it was thinner than it looked. "He called me," she said. "Then he emailed. Then he sent flowers to my office, which I did not enjoy." Something bitter moved through me. That sounds less like romance and more like trespassing. That earned the smallest smile, but it vanished fast. "He says he made a mistake," she said. "He wants to meet. He says there are things he should have said years ago." "And?" She exhaled slowly. "And I hate that part of me still wants answers." I appreciated that she told me the truth that way. No padding, no mercy, no attempt to protect me with softer words. It still hurt. And I sat back in my chair and made myself ask the question like a man, not like someone already afraid. "Do you want to see him?" Chloe was quiet for so long I started wishing I had not asked. "Maybe," she said at last. "Not because I want him back. I don't think I do, but because there's a version of me that never got to finish being angry. And I don't know what happens if I keep dragging that unfinished thing into something new." Something new. That was what she called us. Not small, not casual, not confusion. Something new. And somehow that made the fear sharper. I nodded once. "Then you should do what gives you peace." Her eyes came up fast. That sounded very noble. "It was miserable," I said. But it was honest. For the first time that night, she looked at me with open sadness. "James?" I shook my head. "No, and don't make this easier for me than it is." The waiter came. We ordered food neither of us tasted. Conversation moved in circles and then stopped moving at all. When we stood outside afterward, the city around us felt louder than usual, like it had no respect for what was breaking open between 2 people on a sidewalk. "I need time," Chloe said. I had already known that did not make hearing it easier. "To think?" I asked. "To be sure," she replied. The next sentence nearly stayed inside me. Nearly. "Be sure about him," I said, or be sure about me." She flinched at that, very slightly. "Enough." And that was an answer enough for one night. She stepped closer then, and for 1 weak second, I thought she might kiss me. Instead, she hugged me. Long, tight, careful, and like someone saying goodbye to the version of a thing that had not yet been named. The silence after that lasted 19 days, I know because I counted the first 7 on purpose and the rest by damage. I did not text first. That was not pride, it was respect. She had asked for space, and love that cannot honor a boundary is just control wearing softer clothes. At work, I became efficient to the point of cruelty. Fewer jokes, shorter meetings, cleaner presentations. I finished everything early and trusted none of it to make me feel better. Victoria noticed. Of course she did. She called me in on the second Monday of the silence and shut the door behind me. "You look tired," she said. "I'm employed," I replied. That almost made her smile, but not quite. "Chloe met Lucas." There was no point pretending I did not know. "Now, yes." Victoria studied my face for a moment. "And she asked for distance." "Yes." She walked to the window, arms folded. "When she was 24, she loved him enough to shrink for him. That is not a mistake she forgives quickly, especially not in herself." I said nothing. After a few seconds, Victoria turned back to me. The steel was still there, but something else was under it now. Age, regret, maybe even guilt. "I pushed too hard in the beginning," she said. That admission from her felt almost unreal. "Yes," I said. She nodded like she deserved that. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Do not disappear on her because she is confused. Men have done enough disappearing in my daughter's life." I should have hated that sentence coming from her. Part of me did, but another part heard the mother in it. Not the CEO, not the strategist. Just a woman who knew exactly what wounds her daughter still carried. "I won't chase her," I said. "I didn't ask you to." "Good." Victoria looked at me for one long second. "You love her?" It was not a question. I swallowed once. "That is none of your business." Her expression softened in a way I had never seen before. "No. But it may be the first wise thing she has reached for in a long time." I left her office angry and shaken, because hearing the truth out loud did not make it less true. I loved Chloe, not in the easy way, not in the dramatic way, in the costly way, in the way that asks a man to stay still when every frightened part of him wants to run first and call it dignity. That night, I took the torn pieces of the reservation card out of my desk drawer. I had kept half, and she had kept the rest. On the back of my piece, I wrote 5 words. "I'm still here, no pressure." Then I put it in an envelope and left it with the doorman at her building the next morning. No text, no call, no request attached to it. 3 days later, my phone lit up. "Can you meet me tomorrow?" "Navy Pier, 7 p.m. I got there early, not because I was eager, because standing still at home had become impossible. When Chloe finally appeared, she was wearing a dark coat with her hands tucked into the pockets. She looked tired, beautiful, terrified in a way that made me want to protect her and shake her at the same time for having this much power over my pulse. She walked straight up to me. "I met him," she said. I nodded once. "Okay." He apologized. For all of it, New York, the pressure. Man, the way he tried to make love sound like obedience. My jaw tightened. Chloe looked out at the water before continuing. "And for 10 minutes, I hated how much easier it would be to go back to someone I already survived." That one hurt. She turned to me then, eyes wet but steady. "But easy is not the same as safe." I did not move. "James," she said, voice shaking now, "when I was with him, I kept hearing this awful thought in my head. That maybe you only stayed because my mother opened the door. That maybe if she had chosen someone else, you would have gone where the power pointed." There it was. The question from the hallway, the wound beneath all of it. I stepped closer, slowly enough that she had time to stop me if she wanted. At the start, I said yes to a dinner I should have refused harder. I hate that part, and I will always hate that part. She held still. But after I met you, every honest thing was mine. Every call, every walk, every night I wanted to hear your voice, every time I left room for you to choose. That was me, Chloe. Not your mother, not my job. Me. A tear slipped down her cheek. I kept going. I could survive losing a position. I could survive starting over. What I could not survive is becoming the kind of man who lets power decide who he loves. Her face broke then. Not badly, not dramatically. Just enough for the truth to get in. I don't want easy, she whispered. I took the other torn half of the reservation card from my coat pocket. I had asked the doorman for it back when I sent the note, and he had looked at me like I was unwell. Chloe stared at it. Then, with shaking fingers, and she reached into her bag and pulled out her half. For a second, we just stood there, each holding proof of the same ugly beginning. Then she placed her piece over mine. The tear lines matched. I kept it, she said. So did I. She let out one broken laugh through her tears. That feels unhealthy. Probably. That made her smile. A real one this time. Small, trembling, enough. Then she stepped into me and I wrapped my arms around her like I had been waiting 19 days and half my life. She buried her face against my chest and I closed my eyes, feeling the city move around us while the only thing that mattered stood still in my arms. We did not kiss right away. That was not what this moment needed. It needed truth. So when she looked up at me, and I touched her cheek and said the sentence I knew I would spend the rest of my life proving, I will never ask you to become smaller to keep me. Chloe's mouth trembled. Then she whispered, stay anyway. So I did. And that changed everything.